Hello, good evening, and welcome to the program. This is Sunday Politics, coming to you live from Trust TV, from our studio here in the Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria. It's good to have you join us again this weekend as we take a look at developing issues within and around the continent, especially one that has to do with the impact it is likely going to have on the polity. And of course, as always, on the program, we give you informed perspectives as well as context with regards to some of these developing issues. Speaking of developing issues, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger Republic have finalized plans to form a new confederation, the Confederation of the Alliance of Sahel States, marking a geopolitical shift in the West African region. Now, this move showed their departure from their former colonial ruler France and a turn towards closer relationship with Russia. Now, the announcement was made following a meeting of the three nations' foreign ministers in Niger's capital, Niamey, on Friday. Niger's foreign minister, Bakari Sangare, confirmed the finalization of the draft text that outlines the institutionalization and operationalization of the AES, as it will come to be known. Now, this is coming just days after ECOWAS confirms normalization efforts to bring Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso back into the ECOWAS fold. So, what does this mean for the West African region in terms of security, in terms of economic growth and development, as well as regional harmony? On the program tonight, joining us is a former diplomat with the ECOWAS Commission. Ambassador Haruna Warkani is joining us tonight to help us navigate the issues and provide some well-needed perspectives. Ambassador, as always, thank you so much for joining us in the program. It's good to see you again.
Thank you for having me, viewers.
Right. It's safe to say that to some extent, we should have seen this coming. But one would have thought over the past few months, with ECOWAS lifting some of the sanctions on Niger, for instance, alongside all these other countries that are now being led by the military juntas, Mali and Burkina Faso, one would have thought that normalization efforts are now well underway, even after the request by these countries to depart ECOWAS officially. What are your thoughts about where we are today? They're not only coming back, but they're moving ahead with the formation of this alliance of Sahel states.
Thank you. I remember you asked me almost the same question some moments back, and the position was very clear. These countries did not serve notice. They decided to pull out of ECOWAS. Serving notice is different from pulling out. They were aware, ab initio, of the fact that they require 1 year's notice to be given to ECOWAS that we intend by the end of the year to pull out of ECOWAS as a result of ABCD. This 1 year was supposed to be a buffer within which you could negotiate with such country. Mauritania did this in the year 2000, when they formally approached ECOWAS to say, look, we are an Arab nation, we have some differences, we can't continue with ECOWAS, we do not want ECOMOG here for any reason, etc., etc., and therefore we intend to pull out. 1 year after, negotiations were formalized and Mauritania left. In this circumstance, however, the three military regimes did serve no notice. Rather, they announced their departure. This is the difference. And I recall very well that time. I said, these people are acting with military precision. If you look back at the text which was read at their departure, you could see a determination of an expression of sovereignty of these countries. And there was no going back. Because for them, what they have foreseen, being the remainder of what ECOWAS shall be, was not in their sovereign interest.
Just pardon the interruption. For some people observing and analyzing this particular development, this alliance that they've announced right now is more of a survival tactics than it is about the sovereignty of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, because ECOWAS never threatened their independence. However, if they depart ECOWAS and form their own alliance, they can guarantee their stay in power. Isn't that also part of the calculation?
No, not just that. A regional bloc threatening to invade a fellow member country, that was enough. You are challenging the sovereignty of that nation. If there was a domestic matter, which is the military takeover, there must be some other ways. We have said it here. There must be some innovative means of resolving such crises, not to the extent of bringing military chiefs to sit down and start planning how to invade such a member country. That means you are tampering with their sovereignty. Now, if they willingly accepted to be members of ECOWAS, how come you are using the same regional bloc to threaten them with invasion? I mean, that was like the last straw that broke the camel's back in this matter. And you could see the allegations of these countries not enjoying the comfort of the commission or community, I think, was very obvious. So for them, yes, it was a matter of survival as a country, and then expression of their views on matters of international relations. They cannot sit back and see a colonial master undermining everything that was what they stood for, and the regional bloc was doing nothing about it. I did say here on this program that the only reason why ECOWAS today does not have a single currency is France. France made it impossible for this sub-region to have a single currency going back in the 80s when this thing was designed to have come into effect. But France made it possible at every stage to thwart the efforts of the regional bloc so that France will continue to dominate. Now, you can't run new modern societies or countries where their central bank is still resident in France. You cannot run a country that has no national currency. You cannot run a country where their national armies are dictated by what they want from France and not the country itself. You cannot run a country where mineral resources are owned by the colonial master. It has decisions as to who should mine, how much, where, and what royalties you should pay. And these royalties are paid not to the country, host country, but to France.
I mean, there is no gainsaying that, France has more than exploited its former colonies.
Yeah.
But what has that got to do with, the regional body that is ECOWAS, for instance? Why is ECOWAS apparently bearing the brunt of this detachment between France and its former colonies?
Well, very simple. You are our leader. We have a regional bloc. We've submitted part of our sovereignty to you. We expect protection. When this protection doesn't come at the right time and in the right volume or quantities, it becomes a problem. We feel vulnerable. I think this is an expression of hopelessness of these countries because now they've been faced with insurgencies all over the place. Yes, France came, established a base, military base, to fight insurgency, in quotes. America came, established a military base to fight insurgency. Two very important players on the international scene, very powerful countries. One most powerful and another one almost the most powerful in Europe, teaming together to fight insurgency in a particular country, the size of Niger, and there has been no appreciable progress. How do you explain that? Now, in all this, ECOWAS has never made a strategic move to say this is our own contribution to fighting insurgency within the sub-region, including Nigeria here. When was it last?
Well, we have the multinational joint task force, don't we, where we have soldiers from across the region addressing the same issue. I mean, ISIS in this particular area, Boko Haram, terrorist elements, and so on and so forth.
Well, multinational joint task force, largely based around the Lake Chad area. I mean, this includes Chad, which is also not a member of ECOWAS. Therefore, it is not an ECOWAS affair. And that's why it has limited whatever it is. What we are saying is, ECOWAS had established a standby force. This standby force was supposed to interfere in some issues of conflict or security breaches in member states and the rest of them. Since the coming of insurgency in West Africa, going way back in 2009, you could easily accuse ECOWAS of grave silence over this matter. Where has ECOWAS deployed soldiers, for instance, in response to either of these conflicts that has besieged these West African nations, Nigeria, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Bissau, etc., even Guinea? We had skirmishes all over the place. ISWAP has literally taken over the Sahel space and are dominating and telling governments and citizens how and what to do. Where is ECOWAS? That's the question critical to all this.
Do you think at this point in time we need to have a conversation whether ECOWAS is fit for purpose? Because clearly what these three countries, albeit under military regimes, are saying is that ECOWAS no longer serves the purpose with which it was created.
Well, the regional harmony has disappeared. At least it's dismembered and is going. We did say here that ECOWAS as an institution needs to wake up and perhaps employ all and every means possible to intervene diplomatically, that is quietly behind the scene, to see whatever it can do. I have suggested here that there are still some political leaders in the sub-region that could be approached to assist. Yes, maybe they have done that, because we have seen in one of those instances where General Gowon was approached to intervene, because he happens to be the only living founding father of this sub-region body. There are still many others, including traditional rulers of repute, who should have been on the way, on the move, to cajole these members who are threatening to go, and now they have taken further steps to go, meaning they have consolidated their position and is almost reaching a point of no return, which is so dangerous for the organization, because I did say here and I repeat, if we reach a point where the quorum numbers are broken, it means ECOWAS itself existentially cannot exist. If you cannot form a quorum, it means there should be technically and legally no decision making. And we are fast approaching that milestone if care is not taken. You've seen what has happened.
Why do you say that?
Well, you've seen what has happened in Senegal. After all the hula baloo, finally you have a government that is democratic enough. But the young man has said very clearly, one, he is breaking all ties with France. He wants a national currency of his own. He wants a central bank of Senegal.
Is that not something ECOWAS would want? Is that not what something ECOWAS would seek to achieve itself?
No.
As a regional body?
Globally, or let's say ultimately, yes, the essence of floating a second currency for ECOWAS or a single currency for the sub-region will technically be to remove this France influence. However, you can see it has taken the organization so many years of too many meetings achieving nothing, absolutely nothing, because up to now, when you talk of single currency, you are still talking of fundamental issues like convergence criteria, etc., to get a single currency. Even a second currency that was used as a ladder to promote the emergence of another currency so that there can be a convergence of two currencies only in West Africa to a final single currency in West Africa has failed. Now, if these things repeatedly are not working, these countries we are talking about, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Mali, Côte d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin, are still tied to the Central Bank of France. The AES are questioning this rationale. The issue is, if truly ECOWAS represents everybody, this should not have been up to now. I think that's the key thing they are looking at. And so once these countries come together, what will come first will most likely be a national army.
Right.
Right. Followed by a redefinition of the borders, a new immigration policy, and a national currency, and a government, and a bank, central bank, to manage their economy. I mean, once that happens, you are going to have a parallel body within the ECOWAS space, and that will be very difficult to manage, because what it means is, besides the loss of civil servants at the ECOWAS Commission and its various agencies in all the member states, imagine, will be affected. People will need to go back home, people will need to lose their jobs and go back and start a new life altogether, and some policies and programs that are running today will definitely cease to exist, because some of these members of the AES are hosting some parastatals of ECOWAS or agencies of ECOWAS. It means effectively they will close down and go home. Negotiations are winding down, and all those protocols that follows will now be maybe the thing that will concern ECOWAS without a choice. And it means you will have an organization that has like less than 4 or 5 members. Togo is already boiling, as we know, switching over from a presidential system to a parliamentary system of government through some very, very unacceptable means. But as usual, the whole thing has been thrust on the citizenry of the country, and they have no choice but to abide by it, and people are watching. Things are not working. Tomorrow morning, if there was a coup in Togo and they say they too are pulling out, what do? Senegal is neither in ECOWAS today nor out of it. So you have a comme ça situation.
Can you qualify that when you say Senegal is not in and Senegal is not out?
Well,
based on their anti-French sentiment?
Yeah, not just.
What influence does France have over ECOWAS, in your view?
France has the first and the last word on ECOWAS. Not even the heads of summit of the heads of state and government. They dictate the tune of what happens in ECOWAS. And so, the reason why the president in Senegal said he is considering asking France to leave is for the same reason the 3 countries that are forming a confederation have also advanced in their pull out of ECOWAS. That means Senegal is already looking at this confederation and the possibility of working together and perhaps being a member of this confederation. We shouldn't rule that out.
Okay, let's just show the map one more time so that we can get some sort of clarity about what this may look like. Already these 3 countries, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, obviously we see Chad there, but you can see Senegal also just around the corner. You can see Burkina Faso just down there to the south, I believe, of Niger and Mali. So give me an idea, if this is the goal, for instance, how does this work? Because we're also talking about economically some of the poorest countries in the region or on the continent. How does this work exactly? You cut off France, and then you cut off your own local or rather regional economies that you work with in terms of trade and other investments.
Well, I think it's an unavoidable outcome of some of these extreme situations that the Commission or the ECOWAS community has found itself. Because, like we said here some months ago, this formation of the AES will lead to some other countries within the region looking at the model as being better than what ECOWAS was offering. And if that becomes the case, you will have more members joining, and by joining it means they are leaving ECOWAS technically. So there is...
You think AES is more attractive than joining ECOWAS, than staying in ECOWAS?
Yes.
How so?
Obviously, for the first time, if Niger could have the opportunity of taking out France out of his territory, I am not sure there has been any important decision taken by that country since independence, 1960. None, other than this. This effective disengagement of France in the affairs of Niger would be the most important decision the citizens and government of that country has taken since independence. Same for Mali, and same for Burkina Faso. Now, in the case of Burkina Faso, you will see clearly the disgust of the presence of France in that country. Now, Niger will be earning more money in a year than it has earned since 1960 from its uranium mines. That is a fallout of what has happened. Where is the remaining ECOWAS countries? Each and everyone in this region has enormous mineral resources that France has dominated, including Nigeria, that was not a colonial property of France. Today, if you remove Shell in the oil sector, the next is Total. Total, Fina, and the rest of them, who are French. The number of French companies operating in Nigeria are more than British-sponsored businesses in this country. It seems we do not ask questions.
Is this a good or a bad thing? I mean,
Very
it looks
bad.
like they're here for business.
No.
Are there other
Beside business,
right?
beside business, France is here for its strategic national interest. Some are not business.
Is there an alignment between what they want and what is good for Nigeria?
No, it's the opposite. It is their strategic national interest, not the interest of Nigeria. France has been accused squarely for sponsoring Boko Haram, for instance. And you can't rule it out. Now, the fact that we find ourselves encircled by France through proxy of these French-speaking countries, including the sea, I said the other time. Perhaps it also speaks French as a language. We are in trouble as a country. And unfortunately for us, it also looks, the present administration here in Nigeria, instead of distancing itself from what is also happening around the neighbors, we are like courting France the more.
You think that is where we is not reading the room well when it comes to France and its unpopularity right now on the African continent?
Definitely. I think any country that is worth its salt and a country with a vibrant foreign policy will surely discern that the presence of France and its influences on our domestic and international affairs here should be minimizing rather than increasing, which is what we are seeing here. And I think those who are handling Mr. President here ought to take note that this should not continue, because beside the bad publicity it is giving the government, technically, economically, and politically, it is not good for us, because something that your neighbor has rejected, classified as a tissue paper, and say, leave my country today. And the government of France had the audacity to say, we do not even recognize your government, we are not leaving. The ambassador remains in Niamey. And the government said, okay. It took some time. Citizens came up. Finally, the ambassador had to be extracted out of that country. France, for the first time ever, is so challenged that they had to close down their military base and pull out their soldiers. I think is unprecedented. Therefore, it will be very attractive to other countries watching what is going on, because there's nothing as sweet as independence. true independence, not the kind of independence that we had in the 60s, where we were still subservient to the colonial masters in the name of now we are independent, flag independence. That's not what we are talking about. There should be real economic and political independence so that we can decide things for ourselves. France cannot continue to mine resources in these countries and does not even pay adequate royalties. We have seen what has happened with the price of uranium on the international market because of their departure from Niger. France is busy here in Nigeria exploring uranium, and government has given it almost unfettered access to every part of Nigeria. I mean, we can't continue. We shouldn't continue. The foreign ministry should be able to say something. Nigeria is too big to be treated this way. We are just too big, too complex, too important to the international community, not even to ourselves now, to the international community, for us to allow a country or two to dictate to us what should happen.
Right. Now, they're moving away from France, clearly. They've pushed out the French government out of Niger, and that is what is obviously permeating across the region now. Even the likes of Senegal that have not, had any sort of military interregnum as far as this development is concerned, is also voicing out its disdain over the control, the influence, and the exploitation of France. But also, the AES particularly has been opening its arms to Russia. We've seen the deployment as well as the arrival of some of those military hardware from Russia to some of these countries like Niger Republic, for instance. Give me your assessment of where this leads us, because these proxy wars are very popular. We've seen some of these Western powers fight each other on the international scene, using other countries, using other forces, using other people, for instance. What does this embrace of Russia mean for the region, particularly?
Well, it's interesting because Russia arrived the scene, let me say, obviously in the modern era, besides its support for liberation struggles in the 60s. In the modern era, Russia's first port of call, I would say, was Central Africa. It came in and found a very, very dangerous situation in the Central African Republic, where peace became so elusive. France, America, the United Nations, and everybody around was unable to restore peace to that country. Russia took it upon itself, though people are accused of the private armies and of Wagner Group and the rest of them. But today, Central African Republic enjoys peace and tranquility. They have been able to elect a government of their own. Governance is going on smoothly. Now the question is, where has been France, America, and the United Nations all these years where Central African Republic had nothing close to peace? These are the issues. So Russia's arrival in West Africa, effective arrival, let me say, because Russia has always been around, but effective arrival in West Africa, I think should also be a welcome event for us in a way, because there may not be a total vacuum. When France and America are asked to leave, yes, there must be a second plan. And the second plan is, yes, Russia is coming in. We have seen the fraternity between Burkina Faso, Mali, Guinea, Niger, of the Russians. And you can see how smooth the Russians have operated. As America is dismantling its military base in Niger, Russia was also coming in to occupy.
Right. We also understand that they're shopping for their next location, by the way, which has brought the Tinubu administration under intense pressure to have to come out and deny that it is even thinking about allowing the United States forces to deploy their troops here in Nigeria and perhaps even form a base in one of locations here in the country. Well, the conversation is about regional harmony, the future of ECOWAS, and the newly formed AES, which is an alliance of the Sahelian states that include Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. What does this mean? What is the implication on the economics of the region, the security of the region, the harmony of the region, as well as what comes next? More on this conversation in just a moment after the break. Join us again. Welcome back to the program. Thank you most kindly for staying with us. You're watching Sunday Politics on Trust TV. Here's just a quick reminder: you can watch the show on the go by joining our YouTube and Facebook live stream, following us across our social media platforms, also visiting our website trusttv.com so you don't miss out on any of our content. We're back to further the conversation on ECOWAS, what's happening in the region. We have a new alliance. The three foremost countries that have been sanctioned by ECOWAS, that have been suspended because of the military coups that has upended democratic rule across these countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger Republic, have decided they no longer want to stay in ECOWAS. They have notified them months ago about their departure, but now they've formed a new confederation, so to speak. It's called the AES, Alliance of Sahelian States, and this is proving to be quite the formidable challenge to ECOWAS dominance across the region. Now, this was also confirmed by Niger's Foreign Minister Bakari Sangare, who confirmed the finalization of the draft text outlining the institutionalization as well as the operationalization of the AES. Now, is this the beginning of the end for ECOWAS? We've been speaking to a diplomat who understands the politics as well as the administration of ECOWAS, because he has been a diplomat with ECOWAS Commission. We're talking to Ambassador Haruna Warkani, who has been helping us navigate some of the issues as far as this development is concerned. Now, just before the break, we were talking about some of the, the hotspots as well as the critical issues that have been unearthed since the military coups happened in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and Niger, which, ECOWAS tried to push back on, even with the threat of an invasion into some of these countries. Looking at where we are right now, and just days ago, ECOWAS was, by the way, doubling down after a summit here in Abuja about how it is beginning to normalize relations with these three countries. From your experience, right, with regards to what happened with Mauritania, you talked about Mauritania, but of course Mauritania, there was no military takeover, so it was a cordial diplomatic disengagement, so to say, or divorce, whichever way you want to look at it.
Yes.
Give me a sense of whether the windows of communications are still open, the lines or channels of communication are still open at this point in time, especially with the announcement of the formation of the AES. Is ECOWAS going to give up its normalization efforts at this moment?
Well, I think ECOWAS will continue to believe negotiations might perhaps bring about some reversals. However, I think the members of the AES have vowed and made up their mind. As you can see, they are systematically moving forward with their agenda, having announced not just intention, like I said, their departure from ECOWAS, which is very abnormal. And right now, there will be plenty of issues to resolve with these countries, between those countries and ECOWAS. There are commitments, financial commitments, there are institutional issues that need to be resolved, plenty of it. So the departure or disengagement is not as simple as it looks, because from the staff at the headquarters here in Abuja and the various agencies scattered around all these places, the West African Health Organization is in Ouagadougou, Bobo Dialoso in Burkina Faso, Youth Center is in Niger, you have some other organizations in Mali, and other places like Senegal and the rest of them, scattered all over the place. So what it means is if they say they are going on final, which apparently looks like what it is going to happen. Because the question is, if they come back, what benefits is ECOWAS giving them as a carrot? Apparently none.
An acknowledgement that the military can stay longer until elections are held? Isn't that part of the negotiations before things went haywire?
Oh, okay, very good. How long? How long is the question? How long do you allow the military to remain to birth a new transition program that will bring back a democratic, etc., etc.? That is not going to work anymore because these people are already firmly entrenched in their government, and so they take decisions and implement the way they see it.
Does having Russia in their ear, and apparently, as you stated, having France in the ears of ECOWAS complicate things further? Because, you know, it's not as if these countries are the only ones talking to each other about, you know, a common ground. You also have these international, you know, global powers who are meddling in the conversation. Does that complicate the negotiations further?
In fact, it is actually the bane of the negotiations. France, you have been here for so long. We cannot do an arithmetic of what we have benefited from you rather than what we have lost over the years. Russia is coming as a new friend. Anything new is new. And therefore, these countries are likely to be happier receiving Russia in their midst. After all, imagine a former colonial power that will tell you you cannot even buy military equipment from anywhere without their permission. What kind of independence are you having? Russia provides this military equipment sometimes almost for free to these countries. And they have demonstrated clearly that for them, no strings are attached. We did say here, for instance, when Nigeria went out to US to buy Tucano jets, the Tucano jets were eventually sold after all said and done. The jets arrived here and you start giving us conditions under which these jets can and cannot be used. I mean, we are fighting an insurgency and you say we can't use these jets to bomb Boko Haram or whatever. I mean, we took our money, morally speaking, we took our money and gave you. You gave us a jet. And you say we can't use it the way we want. Where on earth can we ever find that kind of a scenario? So for any independent country and its leaders who are not looking at these red flags and continuing any relationship with these countries tells you that you are not thinking about your people, rather it is personal relationship or trust or protection to rather remain in power rather than advancing the interests of your country. I think this is what these new member countries of AES have suddenly found. And I don't believe they will want to come back into ECOWAS for any reason whatsoever, because
there's nothing anyone can ECOWAS can say or do that would bring them back to the fold.
No, there's nothing to negotiate. Nothing. What are you offering better than what they are enjoying today? Suddenly, they have military equipment from Russia.
New terms and conditions.
Like what now? They do not have any proposals on the table that can look very attractive to these people. Even if you ask them to remain in power forever, that's not the solution.
I mean, the economy is still struggling. If they go ahead with this and ECOWAS decides to cut ties economically with these countries, they are going to suffer before they're able to stabilize, isn't it?
Don't forget, here on this program, or sister programs, we did say when ECOWAS imposed those sanctions, that was the greatest mistake. Sanctions don't work. Sanctions are usually against the poor, not the government. You impose sanctions today, the people in government will continue to enjoy their lifestyles as they want. It is the citizenry that you are punishing. The sanctions that ECOWAS imposed did not work. There is no border between Nigeria and Niger, physical border, that you can say, here is the line, don't cross. Go to any of the Nigeria's borders from Lake Chad to Sokoto and see whether any of these borders can be managed, controlled, and truly prevent people from crossing. You have a border that is very artificial, first and foremost, drawn by Europeans in the 80s. So how do you manage that? Imposing the sanctions, therefore, would be nominal sanctions. You impose the sanctions, you try to do whatever, and at the end of the day, you see people busting the sanctions and things working the way they are. Historically, let us go a little further. China built a wall that was 3,000 kilometers long to protect its citizens in those days against invasion, against this, against that. Unfortunately, these borders, and these walls never worked because even the guards were compromised in some instances. And China recorded like 3 successive invasions, even with the Great Wall. So America has built a wall around itself to prevent Mexicans and other people in South America generally flooding the country. It doesn't work. Sanctions, therefore, do not work. And therefore, even if ECOWAS says, as it had done, unilaterally lifted the sanctions. Remember, ECOWAS, these countries never came to beg, lift these sanctions. ECOWAS on itself looked through and found that these sanctions perhaps are bringing the wrong effect, and therefore on its own, with the fear of this departure of these countries, decided to unilaterally lift these sanctions. It didn't stop there because these countries did not see the lifting of that sanctions to be sincere enough. And so they didn't even bother as if anything happened. Ordinarily, you will expect them to say, oh, thank you, Mr. ECOWAS, for lifting the sanctions. We are friends once more. We want to continue. Let us see how best we can negotiate the remaining issues. But these countries kept mute. Diplomatically, it sent a signal.
They're military men, so you can understand that, sometimes you have to read their body language to understand what they're not saying. But looking at where we are right now, with AES in its infancy, right, at some point in time in the near future, you reckon that there's going to have to be some kind of relationship? Because we share common borders, isn't it? There is no way we're not going to have some kind of relationship. So what kind of relationship do you see ECOWAS, member states, and members of the AES having going forward? And what would that actually mean? Especially when we need to collaborate on issues like security, for instance, as well as trade and investment. How do you see it, happening?
Excellent. In fact, what we should concern ourselves now will be how do we build a new relationship between AES and ECOWAS, whoever remains in ECOWAS, particularly the Anglophone. We are so weak because we don't share a common boundary, unfortunately, in the whole setting. In Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, the only 2 boundaries that you can say are contiguous is Sierra Leone and Liberia. Now, this makes it very difficult for the Anglophone country blocs to do anything together. And that's why even the issue of a second currency that was permuted in 1999, if I get it right, could not succeed. Now, there has also been this mistrust between Nigeria and Ghana, almost to a level of competition. We have another problem. We are going to be faced with a scenario where we might be forced to start talking to the AES as a confederation, vis-a-vis ECOWAS as a regional bloc. Whoever remains here with us in ECOWAS will need to be talking to these people as a bloc.
You keep saying whoever remains. Do you have concerns that more countries would want to leave? Is that what you're saying?
More countries are leaving. It's emphatic. More countries are leaving. Togo surely is a candidate. Cote d'Ivoire is a candidate. The ruling dynasty in Togo and Cote d'Ivoire, both Francophone countries, are in serious existential issues there, because forget what is going on. These have become like a dynasty that you cannot avoid. And believe me, what is happening in these new AES countries is gingering a lot of societal upheavals in the minds of people, believing that, okay, it's possible. Now, see what the young man in Burkina Faso has just done. Reduce politicians' salary, increase civil servants' salary, and maintain his post and salary as a military captain. What else would you want? Citizens will be happy to have a leader like that. Here in Nigeria, for instance, Labour has been agitating for a minimum wage review. It's taken the government 1 whole year without achieving any result. At the end of it, a minimum wage of 48,000 was announced. Evidently, whether you like it or not, if you have conscience in this government, you will know that something is wrong somewhere. People cannot, in the same economy, earn up to 30 million naira. And you have someone earning 30,000 naira a month for 12 months, and they go to the same market. If you are not ready for governance, the easier thing to do is to say, I have failed, I cannot continue. But if you must continue, then you must continue on the path of conscience and good governance. Good governance is the only armor against military coups. If we don't, surely we shouldn't also expect that nothing can happen.
Do you think this is our own version of the Arab Spring, especially looking at what has happened over the past 3 years and counting? Because these tensions still permeate, especially across some of these countries where it's clear that the signs are there.
We are already here, and I suppose there will be like little room for going back, because apparently there's a disconnect between the government and the the governed. Citizens are sincerely unhappy. People of all good conscience have said things are not working. What the government is busy doing will be to impose new taxes, levies, and all sorts of things, collecting from the people and giving themselves in power to share. From the fuel subsidy removal to electricity tariff review to cybersecurity tax levy and all whatnot. Now, plenty of levies to contend with. Yet, the question is, where are citizens getting the extra money to finance their livelihoods? We can't answer that question. You have increased fuel by 300%, and salaries and incomes and wages of citizens have remained where they were before. It is a clear sign. Now, don't forget that in Tunisia, Algeria, and even Egypt, it was the cost of bread review that overthrew some of those governments. Just price of bread that was seen to be wrongly fixed, and citizens say, enough of this. And once it starts, it becomes very, very difficult for anybody to reverse, because now the ill feelings, the mistrust, and suffering seem to be so pervasive that it's not as if there is a particular group of people that are immune to what is going on, and therefore government needs to take time and look at what it is, because the essence of actually being elected is to ensure that means and livelihoods of citizens are first and foremost protected. Right. Our leaders should not live for IMF and World Bank, because all these policies we see are the prescriptions of IMF and World Bank.
Right, okay. Interesting thought there, and perhaps something we would look forward to exploring in yet another episode of the program. But for now, we're going to have to anchor the conversation here, Mr. Warkani. As always, thank you most kindly for joining us. We really do appreciate you for the insight and for your analysis. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you, viewers. I appreciate being here.
And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you most kindly for joining us. Feel free to be a part of the program next week Sunday, when we return live and exclusive, as always, on Trust TV. For now, from myself, Abdullah Ahmed, and the rest of the team, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.